give me 10 minutes of your time, and I want to walk through this because I want to try to condense everything that rocked my world in a great way and totally open my mind to a whole other way of understanding my faith in God by this. Okay, so what I want to look at is, I want to look at 3 stages of philosophy. Philosophy means love of wisdom, right? So it's this desire to figure out what's true, what's real, and those, it's been there from way before Jesus Christ. People were trying to do this. We're pursuing what is true, what is good, what is evil, all these kinds of questions. Those questions were being asked long before Jesus Christ shows up. Okay? So I want to walk through these because each of them has a really important message for us. The 3 different stages essentially that philosophy, this search for wisdom, has passed through. Okay? The first one is the classical period. Okay, so we can say that this goes all the way back to the beginning, but certainly up through about 1500 AD, right? We have all these great philosophers: Aristotle, Plato, Socrates, many of those guys before Christ, St. Thomas Aquinas, right? In Jesus Christ himself, of course, is the greatest philosopher, right? So this all the way up through about 500 years ago, the essential belief was about the same, no matter what culture you were in for the most part. Okay, even before Christ, after Christ, everybody kind of takes this same approach, and this is a great summary of it right here. Most discussion revolves around the question of the happy life. People were asking way before Jesus Christ, in what does human happiness consist, and how do we attain it? Right, so everybody is searching, discussing, looking for this question. Again, before Jesus shows up and has a perfect answer, but everybody's been asking this question. And for the first 1,500 years of Christianity, it was the same thing. They continued to hash this out. Okay, now given what Jesus has said, still, let's combine that. Let's keep talking about this. How do we find happiness? What does it mean? Where do we get it? And how do we live it? Right? Everybody's asking that. This is another quote. For the ancients, Christians and pagans, okay, so Christians and non-Christians, the non-Christians that came before Christ, etc. The question of happiness was primary, okay? Everybody's asking this question. What is it that makes us happy? How do we find it? Where is it at? Not just the short-term happiness, but here we mean the long-term. Where is it, right? And I bet you're looking for the same thing, right? I bet you're looking for the same thing. Now, here's the really destructive thing that has affected your life, and it has affected mine, and it's affected everybody in the world, right? Stage 2. I'm not even going to worry too much about how this happens. We can point to a couple people: William of Ockham, René Descartes, okay, both Catholics, all right? So they weren't trying to destroy things, but they did. Ended up kind of helping destroy a lot of stuff and causing a lot of problems for the world. They didn't know they were doing it. They didn't have evil intentions. Okay, but this idea gets introduced about 500 years ago, and this begins what we call the modern period, the modern philosophical period, if you want. Okay, it starts with this idea, but then it says essentially that God asks things of us, but you and I don't know why God's asking these things of us. Okay, so they're saying there's all these laws that God has given. Modern philosophy 500 years ago says God's given all these laws, and the reason that God has given these laws is we have no idea why. We just have to follow them. We just have to obey them. So for the classic people, the first stage, okay, from all the way up until about 500 years ago, people believed, and even if it was prior to Christ, right? So for Aristotle, Plato, Socrates, these Greek philosophers, right? Egyptian philosophers, there was this belief that this God, or gods, whoever they were, right? But there was this belief that in general there was a divine being or beings who were giving laws, commandments, rules that were oriented towards helping us find happiness, right? That's the whole point of why this God had done these things, right? For modern, what begins to be introduced 500 years ago is, hey, stop thinking about why the laws were given. Just follow them. Just follow them. And that is, I want to submit to you, that is the experience, and that is the mindset of 99% of people in our world today. Christians, Catholics, all of us, people that say they follow God, they are saying, I don't know why these rules are here. I don't know why God gave them to us. I'm just supposed to follow them. If you ask the average teenager that's at Mass on Sunday, why are you here? The vast, vast majority of them will tell you, I'm here because I'm following a rule. It is something that I'm supposed to do, whatever. Why are you not eating meat on Fridays in Lent? The vast, vast majority of teenagers, young adults, and adults are going to tell you, I don't know, it's a rule, I'm following it. Right? Why is there a holy days of obligation? Why does this? Why do you have any of these rules? Right? Why do you abstain from sexuality? Why do you wait and only have sex within marriage? Right? All these kinds of things. You ask that question of that people, and people that are following the rules, vast majority of people stop following them. But the ones that are following will tell you the vast majority of the time, I'm following it only because it's a rule. Right? Only because it's a rule. And that is disastrous. Disastrous, right? That is not what it has typically been about. That is not what God said it's about. God didn't say, follow these rules because I don't tell you why, just follow them. That is not it. So for the vast majority of modern people, which is you and I, and the culture that we kind of grow up in some ways, we'll talk about the third stage here in just a second. But for the vast majority of people coming out of this mindset now, when we no longer say God's giving us rules to make us happy, we take things like the church's teaching on contraception, abortion, sexuality, church on Sunday, tithing your money, don't kill anyone, don't steal. For the modern person, this becomes one thing. These rules are simply a burden. They are a burden. Why are you going to church on Sunday? I don't know, I hate it, it's a burden. Why, as I just said. But for the classical period, right, for the first 1,500 years of Christianity and prior to Christianity, the vast majority of people would say we follow these laws of God, or the gods if we were in Greece or wherever we were. But we follow them because they're going to show us how to be happy. That they're going to point us towards this and orient us towards this happiness. Okay? Huge difference. The vast majority of people who are still practicing Christianity and who are still practicing Catholicism are operating under this mindset that the rules that the church has, the rules that God is giving, are simply a burden. And we don't know why they're there, and they could just as easily be something different. And that will destroy faith. That will destroy it because there's no relationship there. For the moderns, you're not in a relationship with God. God is the supreme lawgiver way up there. Don't try and talk to Him. He will tell you what to do. Do it, follow the rules, and maybe you'll get to heaven and have happiness there. Right? For the classic understanding, right, is that there is this God who loves us, who wants us to be happy now and later, and has come to be in a relationship with us. He sends His Son to help to show us the way, to die for us, to enter into this relationship. We enter into that relationship and we begin to realize that all these things that He's teaching us and this church that He has left us, that they're teaching us, all these things are there so that I can be happy and I can find peace. Okay? All right. This then, really quickly getting into, we sometimes talk about postmodern, right? So it's gotten even worse in some ways, right? Since then. So postmodern philosophy would be people like Nietzsche, Foucault, Jacques Derrida, Jean-Paul Sartre, some of these people that you'll probably have to study in college. They would take, they basically say this. Well, let me read some quotes from them first. Okay, so Nietzsche, God is dead. All right. Nietzsche also said, if you gaze into the abyss begins to gaze into you. Very depressing stuff. Right? Very depressing stuff. Jean-Paul Sartre. Man can will nothing unless he has first understood that he must count on no one but himself. He is alone. He's abandoned on earth in the midst of his responsibilities, without help, with no other aim than the one he sets himself, with no other destiny than the one he forges for himself on this earth. Very depressing. Jean-Paul Sartre also says, hell is other people. Right? Another quote from Sartre, anything would be better than this agony of mind, this creeping pain that gnaws and fumbles and caresses one and never hurts quite enough. And every existing thing is born without reason, prolongs itself out of weakness, and dies by chance. Jean-Paul Sartre. These people, this postmodern worldview is essentially an atheistic one. Okay? But in some ways, it's actually helpful because it shows the problem of the modern mindset. It really just takes what we were talking about here. Postmoderns take this modern worldview and apply it to its fullest and logical conclusions. So really, there's either this kind of God, this classical understanding of God that comes to be in a relationship with us and show us how to be happy, or there really isn't a God. This middle ground of modern lawgiver, God is a lawgiver, just obey, is really idiotic. Okay, it ultimately fails, and that's where these postmodern people eventually come in. So, let me look, I put a little chart here together, if you can see this. The first question, is there a God? The classical people would say yes, the modern person would say yes, and the postmodern would say no, there isn't a God, right? It's a disaster, we're all here by chance. God is, hell is other people. Okay, now this is though important. What does God ask? Okay, so if we ask this question, what is it that this God is asking? Well, first of all, for the postmodern, they'd say there is no God. So that question's out. But for the modern, what is God asking? God is asking us to follow laws. And so for the classical person as well, what is God asking? God's asking us to follow laws. But here's the difference. Why? Why is God asking us to follow these laws? The classical person says, for our happiness. The modern person says, we have no idea why this God is asking us. And the postmodern says, there is no God at all. This distinction right here is the super important one. Both classical and modernists believe that God is asking us to follow laws, but the reason is the difference. The classical person says God wants us to follow laws for our happiness. The modern person says, we don't know why God's asking us to follow these laws, just shut up and follow them and do them, right? It's a terrible notion.